Good. I think we have a few people now online. Can you all hear me well? Lucas, can you hear me?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So welcome to this free webinar, the On Think Tanks webinar series. We're very happy to have Lucas with us. This webinar series is meant to give all of us really an insight into the work of think tank professionals around the world, but also people working with think tanks. We've had Ruth Levine, who is a funder, used to work for the Hewlett Foundation, so she gave us the view of a funder, and we'll have others. We'll have Kerry Albright next, talking about evidence-informed policy more broadly. But now we're happy and lucky to have Lukas Hupfer with us. Lukas is the director of foraus, a Swiss think tank on foreign policy. Foraus is a particularly unique think tank, I think, around the world because it's a grassroots think tank, which generates independent, high-quality recommendations for decision makers. But it does so by leveraging an amazing network of volunteers in Switzerland, and it's been working very actively and very hard to share their lessons with think tankers around the world. And it should be said that we collaborate. I think this is now the 4th year in the organization of a winter school for think tankers in Geneva, which takes place in late January, early February every year. So if anybody's interested in that, we're happy to tell you more about it later. So the way these webinars work, quite simple. Lucas will share a few thoughts. He's going to be sharing his presentation with us, and then after the webinar is over, so after his presentation is over, you will get a chance to ask him questions. Now, to do that, there is a chat box on the side of the screen, or you can open it on your browser. And so please share your comments or questions. So I will be picking them up and passing them on to Lucas when he's done with his presentation.
So thank you very much for this invitation. Happy to be here. And tonight or today, you are my public. So my first question to me was like, when preparing this webinar, was like, what are your interests? Why are you interested in public engagement? And by signing up, some of you actually shared your interest. So what, can you see the next slide now? Sorry. Perfect. So why some of you are interested in our today's webinar is that they want to learn how to communicate their research results. They want to learn how they can have an impact as a think tank, how they can bridge the gap between research and public, how they can provide better public services. So I think among us, there's a representative from a governmental institutions who would like to learn her public and to know how to better provide her services. And one person also said, like, well, I want to understand why people are actually reluctant to change. So like, in other words, why they don't share maybe the vision of the think tank that a person is working with. And I just wanted to give you a short opportunity now, like half a minute or a minute, to think about why are you participating in this webinar? Why are you interested in public engagement? And maybe you can share 2-3 thoughts already in the chat that Enrique could then summarize. Do you have any other thoughts about public engagement and what you would like to learn today or to discuss together?
So if you have a question, an additional question, just share it on the chat box. For instance, I have asked, how is this different from communications?
Or lobbying, yes. Okay, so we had the question, how does this differ from communication or from lobbying? And also, what do you mean by the public? So who is actually our public? So I think these are very relevant questions, and it already reflects a little bit that public engagement is quite a broad term that is also a bit maybe fluffy to discuss about, that it touches upon stakeholder management of think tanks, on communication of research results, on impact of our work as think tanks, and also about our own credibility and legitimacy as think tanks. So it's a very broad set of questions or also challenges to think tanks that one might think of when talking about how think tanks can engage with the public. And I try to narrow down a little bit these questions, but I think, and also to answer your questions, if I don't achieve, please do not hesitate to contact me also after the webinar. I'm happy to always share our experience. And there's also quite a bit of material now on the On Think Tanks website concerning public engagement of think tanks. So what I'm not doing today, actually, it's not, I'm not presenting you and talking about a little bit our model of public engagement. I'm not presenting you a theory or like a scientifically proven method or something. It's more, as I said, I'm going to share the experience of our think tank, our grassroots think tank, foraus, the foraus policy think tank on foreign policy of Switzerland. And in doing so, of course, we will touch upon all these different questions that you just have mentioned. But before starting and going to the in-depth and to the question of our today's webinar, just the 2-3 lines. Sorry. Voila. 2-3 lines on our think tank on foraus. Enrique already mentioned that we are a grassroots think tanks. So we have 1,000 members. We have 120 volunteers, and all these members, they're actually contributing to our content. So we were founded as a students' organizations, and we became, during the last 10 years, it became the most important Swiss think tank on foreign policy. We generate independent, high-quality recommendations to decision makers in foreign policy. And in doing so, we are based on these volunteer structures, on our members. So in my office with 14 people, we have communication experts, we have community engagement managers, but we don't have one single researcher on our payroll. So content is generated bottom up. Our members decide what questions they would like to tackle, how to frame our research questions. It's our members together with the public, and I will explain you what the public is in our case in a few minutes, that are actually doing the research work. And this is a quite unique model, and we have proven that it works over the last 10 years. And we have not only proven that it works in Switzerland, but we are also actually scaling this model worldwide. And so far we have created or co-created 5 sister think tanks in Western Europe. So it is quite a unique model, but as I have argued at the On Think Tanks conference in Geneva in February of this year, I don't think that it is only possible in Switzerland. So I'm convinced if you tackle the question of public engagement in the right way, that you can do public engagement as a think tank anywhere worldwide. But how is this to be done? So the title of today's webinar is Defining Public Engagement as a Value of Your Think Tank. And what I want to say with this is actually 2 main questions, also my 2 important takeaway messages of today. The first thing is, we have seen that there are many questions or many aspects of public engagement linked to communication of your research. You are doing your research, you come up with some results, and you try to explain your results to the public. You try to engage the public to disseminate your results. But my message today is actually that you should go beyond dissemination as public engagement. You should really take or think of public engagement as a broad paradigm, starting in the definition of your research agenda and questions, your research and dissemination. So actually public engagement throughout all your work as a think tank. And the second takeaway message is that you should not only think or view public engagement as a tool, but really as a goal. So you have to incorporate public engagement in your mission statement and your vision of your think tank, and that is how you make a value out of public engagement for your think tank. So in order to a little bit elaborate on these two takeaway messages, I would like to tackle the question of public engagement with two questions. First question is like, why actually public engagement is important for a think tank, and link to that also a little bit what it is. And second, the question of how do I actually engage with my public or my publics. So on the question of why it is important to engage with the public or to enroll the public in your research or in your work as a think tank, I would actually give this question to you again and get your inputs now a little bit on why do you think public engagement is important for think tanks. Please take again a minute or two to think about this question. So I'm sure that all of you are engaging in one way or the other with a public. So you can also state or give examples of what you are doing right now already. I don't know, Enrique, can I ask you to summarize the 2-3 points that came in so far?
Questions are because it helps us to know public issues. So I guess by engaging, we learn more about them. It might help us build credibility by working with the public. Maybe we can gain a bit of credibility from the legitimacy they might give us. I think linked to the first one about getting to know the public issues, about getting to know the real public issues rather than the hypothetical. So no longer an academic debate, but a real debate. In the age of social media, public opinion is more and more relevant to policymakers, and so they must respond directly. I think this is a key, right? It's not just important to know what the science tells you, but also to know what the public thinks about the science. I suggest that because it can help you to build institutions while you're trying to influence policy. For instance, democratic institutions, if you try to influence policy by engaging with the public, maybe you're also helping to strengthen those public institutions. And it's last point, to generate content that is adapted and actually useful for a certain context.
Thank you very much. So I have also summed up a few points. Some of you were mentioned by you. So we have this credibility and legitimacy point of think tanks, and that was actually the main trigger for on think tanks to make public engagement a topic or like a focus of this year, is that think tanks, or in discussions with different think tanks, we have seen that think tanks many times they're actually also perceived as being part of the elite, and that there's kind of a gap between think tanks being part of the political elite and other publics. And I think here it's a for us, at least at foraus, it's a main driver for public engagement, and also our work has proven over the last 10 years that if we actually enroll the public at an early stage of our research and throughout the full work, we can build bridges, we can be a mediator between citizens and the public and the so-called elite of a political context. Another point is dissemination. We have been talking about this, and I think that's the most obvious reason why you want to work with the public. So to actually bring out your work, your messages. The point of quality of your research. This hasn't been really mentioned right now by you, but it's also, in our case, it was a necessity in the beginning, but now also a big lesson learned that actually we think that nowadays challenges, they are quite complex. We are working, today's world is structured among networks. So it's very important actually to bring people together, to bring knowledge from different sectors together, be it the economy, be it the civil society, administration, science, and so on, like universities, to think together and to tackle global challenges or complex challenges together in a collective solutions. And in our case, we always use a bit this terminology, the wisdom of the many. So we are convinced that our research and the quality of our research is better when engaging with the public during the research process already. And maybe something you haven't been thinking about is funding. I mean, I know Switzerland, I know Europe, and here I think if you can show that you as a think tank can actually also play the role of a convener of different actors, if you can show that you force the participation of the society in policy questions, for us, at least here in Switzerland, Western Europe, this can also give you some interesting opportunities in terms of fundraising, because there are many, actually, for example, foundations out there that are worried about the challenges to democracy nowadays, or that would like to work on social cohesion. And so if you as a think tank can show that you are not only interacting with universities and political decision makers, but also with a broader public, this might give you some more opportunities. And also, again, it's linked to credibility and legitimacy. So I would like to ask you one last question in that presentation. It's about why not to engage with the public. Maybe I will explain you a little bit the question of how to engage in a minute, but before doing so, just maybe also to know a little bit or to learn about your thoughts, why you haven't been engaging more with the public, or why do you think public engagement would be difficult to implement in your context and in your think tank work? So do you see any obstacles to public engagement? Are there any more thoughts about reasons not to engage with the public? So Enrique, could you summarize again, just very quickly?
Sure. I think there are two main reasons. One is to do with the level of expertise required to engage on certain issues. So how, it's hard to engage with the public when you're dealing with very niche technical topics. The public might not be interested, but you might not know how to make them interested. And I think another set of challenges relates to the cost, the difficulty of engaging with the public. What is the public as well? And sometimes it's just easier to go through your own private networks. And if your objective is to reach a minister, maybe it's just easier to call the minister than to engage with a much broader audience, mobilize them, inform them, and, help them reach the minister.
Okay, thank you very much. So I will take these questions with me, or these comments, in the next part, which is like how to engage actually with the public. So not the question of why, but how. And here I have 4 points. And I think on the first point, that's a very relevant question. I don't have the perfect answer on that one. And I think my message here is that every think tank or organization should actually think about why is public engagement important for them, and kind of think about the added value of public engagement if in your organization. And I think what I want to say here is that it's normal to have different publics. It's normal that your vision is to actually provide policy or decision makers with concrete research results. But in our case, for example, we're working with different publics. We have our members as contributors of content. We have, as I said, the decision makers. We have different representatives of different sectors defining together with us the research questions. And we even have a method, and I will present it in a few seconds to you, that we can engage with regular citizens in our research. And with all these publics, we have different goals and different methods to engage with them. What is important, I think, is that for each public, you set, you give formats, so you organize formats, and you are present to each of these publics, so you reach out to the public. For example, in our case, we have decided to be active national-wide, so not only to be active in the capital of Switzerland, where politics is being made, but also to be present with 10 regional groups in all parts of Switzerland. And this gives us actually a good opportunity to reach out, to gain more members, but also to get all these inputs from different sectors of the population. Of course, you always operate in a certain bubble, but also here, I think there are ways to break this bubble. For example, we organized in the beginning of this year a so-called Tour de Suisse. So like we toured around Switzerland, and we forced ourselves to go into small villages and to do like some advertisement there for events, to organize events with local representatives, to bring in thesis or like political questions from a national level down to really the small villages of Switzerland. So you have to reach out to your public. You also have to empower the public, because many people, they are afraid of contributing with their thoughts and their questions to sometimes somewhat complex issues of politics. And here, I think also it's, if you want to engage with the public, if you want to have them in your research work, it's important to encourage participation. And you can do that, for example, with specific formats. So we actually organized 2 years ago a series of 54 events, again, all over Switzerland, where we asked politicians to invite to their homes around 10 people. And these 10 people were like asylum seekers. When we were talking about migrations, they were the priests of the village, they were national politicians, they were representatives from NGOs. And here we actually created a small space of 10 people where also regular citizens felt at ease to contribute with their thoughts and ideas. And you might also have to offer some trainings or guidance to people that you are including in your research, because we were talking about the level of expertise that is required for think tank work. But again, here, I think there are different models, and that you can actually get inputs, that you can work together with people. And then maybe for the nitty-gritty of your final research, you have to do it in-house with your researchers. But there are different ways to do that. And so it is important that you find your public, that you find your ways of engaging with it, and that you not only spend time on your content and research, but also on methods, that you develop actually methods to engage with the public. And we have been doing that, so working on methodology, not only content, since the beginning of our work 10 years ago. And just as a final point of my presentation, then I would like to open the debate or discussion, is that I introduce you to this tool called Policy Kitchen, that you can visit on policykitchen.com. And it's a platform, an IT platform, but also a methodology that Foraus has developed in order to engage with the public. So what we are doing, we are defining specific challenges around foreign policy issues, so around our field of expertise and work. For example, in May, we had a global challenge that was named Towards an Inclusive Future of AI, or in AI. In fact, there are different governmental bodies and states working on strategies on AI, and they all state that these strategies should be defined in an inclusive way, so that they want to reach out to the different stakeholders. But we were actually asking, well, this is stated in documents, but are you actually really doing it? So we challenged a bit the governments or the international bodies. We're working with the International Telecommunication Union. How do you want to engage the different stakeholders in your processes in the definition of governance in the field of AI? And so we had 10 workshops worldwide. We had 93 participants worldwide, and we had 43 ideas that came together. So Policy Kitchen is a tool where you meet first in physical workshops, and then you brainstorm around a topic, a specific questions, and the ideas that you have, you put them on the IT platform, where other people, again, no matter where they are, no matter if they have participated in the workshop or not, can actually comment these ideas. They can add further ideas, and then these ideas are refined by our authors and then formulated into so-called policy recipes. So there are different methods already available that you can use as open source. One of them is policykitchen.com, but there are others. So I encourage you, if you have decided to make public engagement a statement of your work, think about methods, think and don't think about methods. And again, there are different tools already out there. So to finish, what are the challenges of public engagement? You have been pointing to some of them. Again, here, my message is don't be afraid of public engagement, but consider allocating enough resources. That was one of the reasons not to engage. And I confirm here that public engagement takes a lot of resources, human resources, but also otherwise, if you want to organize events in all parts of your country, for example. You also have to implement or make sure that the engagement with the public, your engagement is constructive, so that there is actually a discussion going on and that is not becoming a fight between different political parties or something. You also have to be aware that if you start engaging more with the public, this might raise questions within your organization or abroad that they are also included, not only when it comes to like providing ideas for research, but they also want maybe decide on the research agenda. And all in all, I think consider really defining public engagement as a value of your think tank, because if you're doing so, then I'm sure that you can tackle all these challenges. So this is it from my side as a presentation. I'm really happy to take all your comments and questions now. Thank you.
Thank you, Lukas. I think it'd be a good idea if you unshare your screen so they can see you now if you answer any questions. Do you have any, just asking those who sign up, if they have any questions they like to ask, if you can do it via the chat box and I will pass them on. So there's a question about new think tank. So maybe if you can think back at the time when foraus was new, or any lessons you have today about engaging with the public if you are new. Right? So it's one thing to be an established institution that invites people to a conversation. Another is to be an entirely new organization that is trying to engage with the public. How might you go about this?
Do you see me now, or have I unshared?
Yeah, we see you. I see you.
Okay,
I see you twice actually, because you've signed up in 2 computers.
Exactly. And now I have to ask you to repeat shortly the question. Sorry, I was
so how best can a new think tank engage with the public? So one thing is to be an established organization that has a recognizable brand, calls you in for a discussion. Another thing is to be an entirely new organization that wants to do this. How do you convince people to join you and engage with you?
Well, I think it's important that you are active in the public. So sometimes this is very, very tricky in the beginning, because it takes a lot of time and resources to get first funding, or to establish yourself, to have you have your team together and so on. But I think from the first minute on, you should really have events, you should be present, and of course you can then combine this with a certain media strategy. You can try to bring media to these events, you can try to bring like political representatives to these events. But I think you shouldn't wait or like allocate too much resources into like establishing first your internal organization, but you should really start right away with events.
Okay, so just give it a go. Don't worry too much about whether they know you or not, but just go out there and engage with them.
Exactly.
Lucas says, Natalia Torres asks, Lucas, you mentioned mechanisms for constructive collaboration. Can you mention examples? I think you're referring particularly to Policy Kitchen, but are there any other mechanisms or any other tools or approaches that you use to make sure that collaboration is constructive?
I was I was referring first to Policy Kitchen, and what we are doing there. For example, we set up juries. So we have people, professors, members of parliament, representatives for civil society, who are kind of overviewing the process, that are actually selecting the best ideas that are proposed in Policy Kitchen. And we also do a lot of moderation efforts on this digital platform. So that's on the digital platform. On the other side, I think it's important that for example, if you, let me think of another example, constructive in a way that in the first place you really are going outside your bubble. So you really invite the whole political spectrum, so that they cannot say, okay, you're not constructive, or you actually not in a way, because you only invite or work with certain people. So I think it's important to have the full range of actors out there. And of course, you can then target some of them for certain projects and others for others, but as a principle that you're really open to working with all actors.
Any other questions? I have a question. What do you do when you're you decide you've got to build a constituency on a particular issue, and therefore you take your work at different levels of completion to them, but there's no interest, right? This is important, but there's no interest to engage on this issue. I mean, you work on foreign policy issues as well, right? So there's a limited number of people who are interested in this. Most people will be interested in domestic issues. So what do you do if you think that it's important to bring the public along to the discussion, but the public is not interested? Do you just give up and say, well, fine, this is an issue we can address on our own? Or does it mean you have to change tactic?
I mean, it's true that sometimes it's a challenge to get the people enrolled and engaged in your work. And I think what you are doing is that you have to give them as much of responsibility as possible. So, for example, with our members, giving them the opportunity to actually decide on themselves what topics they would like to work on, and not to have this top-down approach saying that now you have to be engaged on this and that question, but also to give them the possibility and the platform to come up with their own questions and interests. I think that's an important point, because if people are only asked to contribute when they're asked for and not in the other times, then they might be a bit more reluctant to participate. And otherwise, it's a lot of work sometimes. So we do stakeholder mappings on a certain question, and then we go out. We go out with communication. We meet people, and we try to really motivate different actors. But what we are not doing, we don't have money to actually pay for participation. So we are very much on this aspect of having to have that they are events with us, and that that it's not this top down.
Okay. And then there's another question that says, how do you deal with dominating actors in a participative format? How do you avoid them silencing others?
Well, I think that is a challenge. For example, if you have only one event where you try to bring together different actors, again, here they are. If it's about an event, there are different ways to moderate a certain event. It's also, there are different ways to ask for the inputs of the participants. With Policy Kitchen there, the nice thing is that anybody can sign up on that tool, that anybody can contribute, no matter if they are a professor, or if they are a student, or if it's my mom, for example. So we have very low barrier in participation. I think that's key.
So yes, I thought I was muted. So I think it's about creating opportunities for people to share their information. It might be that, as you say, you don't just do one event. That is probably not public engagement.
No.
One event, one-off event is probably not what you mean by public engagement. It's a series of events that are designed to capture the broadest of views, and therefore might give people who are not too comfortable speaking up at first the confidence to talk about a subject, learn about it, and then maybe speak up later when they feel they're better informed or they feel more confident with the process.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions about public engagement from the audience? Otherwise, I have one more, but I want to make sure there's some engagement before I am the dominating force as the moderator. I have a question about. Okay, so I'll say I have a question about funding. Again, when I asked you this question in Geneva, does this model only work for Switzerland? I wasn't, tongue-in-cheek question, but I was also I wasn't just thinking about the people involved in foraus, but also the funders of foraus, because what we find across the world is many funders of think tanks that have a big appetite for short-term impact, or at least impact that they can easily trace to their grantees and therefore to their grant, right? So if you say to foraus, I want to see the impact, then it's better for you to go directly to policymakers. If your funder is not so worried about that traceability or the time frame, then you can take your time and you can go to villages, you can go to the community, you can talk to a diverse set of actors, and then in a way allow them to take ownership of the process. I think that's kind of your theory of change, which is very different from a think tank that is just going straight to policymakers, as somebody asked in the chat box, almost doing some lobbying. So what is it about your funders? What do you think it's about your funders that like this approach and that are okay with this? Or are they, and this is just something that you have to fight along the way, right? So it might be that they are demanding impact and traceability, but you have to argue your way out of it.
No, I mean, also our funders, they want to see impact. They want to have clear results. They always want to have something new that we are working on. And so we have to explain them that the topics are bottom up, that it takes time, and that we have a little bit of different thinking than other think tanks in Switzerland. But what we always try is not reaching out to the public is not unlinked to content. So what we do, for example, when we have a series of 54 events on migration discourse in Switzerland, we have all these talks with different people, but then we are there, we take minutes and we kind of analyze what's actually being discussed, and then we feed the different results of this engagement with the public back to decision makers, and we show them what is actually, what does the public, what are they concerned about. And I think that gives us actually an extra legitimacy, knowing that our model is based on public engagement, or that we are designed by the public. Many actually funders, they are interested, or it gives us additional credibility regarding our content that is sometimes also not always designed in this very inclusive approach. So knowing that the public had a saying in our content that is then actually sent to our targeted audience of policymakers, this is interesting for funders. And also in the context of Europe, I know, for example, of an initiative called Civitates. It's umbrella organizations of like 10 funding organizations with Open Society, Mercator, and other big ones in Europe. And they are, for example, supporting actually organizations and think tanks that go out and that engage the public on different societal challenges. So it is for us sometimes a challenge to convince somebody, but once when you can show that what your vision is, and that you actually can show that out of this vision and approach there's also content, so they are fresh new ideas, and that these ideas are actually better because you have engaged with the public, then I'm convinced, or our case shows that then funding can become quite interesting actually.
Great. Sorry, I was muted. That's fantastic. Thank you, Lukas. And we are bang on time. Perfect. Thank you very much for your presentation and for this discussion. If anybody else has any questions, of course, you can contact Lukas. I think he's, as many of us, easy to find. But you can send us an email, and Eva will be sending out an email to everybody who participated and signed up to the webinar, so that and we'll share some information and link to the policykitchen.com, so you can access that and any other information that might be useful related to this session. And if you have any questions, please get in touch with Lukas. Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for joining us. Do check out the On Think Tanks website for future events. Sign up to the newsletter so you get early bird announcements of our future webinars. We have one more coming up with Kerry Albright from UNICEF, who will be talking about evidence-informed policy. We've just secured one for later in the year, which will be on doing your PhD while think tanking, which I think will be a very interesting thing for many of you. So thank you, Lukas, and have a good day. Goodbye, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Enrique. Thank you to all of you. Thank you very much.